Welcome to the Clutch Burners Podcast. This is your home for stick shift drag racing, stick shift tech. And this episode, we're going to dive deep into engine tuning and all that kind of cool stuff. And over there, we've got the Canadian Chuck Norris. Rich Guido.
Look at that. See? Right there.
Oh, look at that hoodie. That's nice. Where's a guy get one of those?
Oh, just call your local friend.
Nice. Oh.
Hey, thanks for kicking us off, Bill. And our guest tonight is the one, the only, the mythical man himself, Matt Blasco.
Matt Blasco.
I'm
That's
not
right.
Quite,
That's
not
right.
quite Rich Guido, but a close second.
Well, you are Canadian, so that's a start, right?
That's not a good start right now.
So first off, I want to kick things off by Matt wishing you a happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
That's right.
I'm about 103.
At least. What do you do to look so good?
I hang out with you, Bill.
Perfect. So maybe I should give a little backstory here. I don't even know how long I've known Matt. Probably at least 10 years. But every time we're out somewhere, like at PRI or Rocky Mountain Race Week, any of these events, every time we're out eating, it's always Matt's birthday.
Him and Fred are very old, yes.
That's right. That's right. So Matt, what is your favorite birthday memory?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe your Mexican restaurant one when I'm on the phone and the guy smashed me with a face full of whipped cream, maybe? I don't know.
Or what about where you rode the saddle at the Outback?
No, that was Montana's.
Oh yeah.
There's been some good desserts, but you end up eating most of them anyways.
Well, that is not.
That's why you do it.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Anyways, why don't I introduce Matt a little bit more, and, make him totally humbled, and then we'll let him kind of describe all the questions we have there about his background and stuff. So Matt is I met him in the U.S. We're both in Canada, but the first time I met him was in Montana, in Havre, and we were both on the way to Drag Week in 2015. Matt had a car in his trailer that he'd probably never driven on the street, or maybe he had. I can't remember.
Not far.
But anyways, through the years that I've known Matt, I have described Matt to a lot of people as probably one of the few people who has like an IT background, but is also mechanically inclined, which makes him very unique for troubleshooting, dyno tuning, and engine analysis, because lots of people are really good with computers, but they don't understand the mechanical part, and some people are good with mechanical, but they don't understand the electronic part. That's what makes Matt the first guy I call wherever I am in whatever state, and then you just gotta watch, because sometimes he tries to get you to dial into Teen Viewer. Don't do that. Like, it's called Team Viewer, just with an M. So don't dial into Teen Viewer or you'll get in trouble. But Team Viewer,
team stuff, not team stuff.
He can get in your computer. Yeah, he can get in your computer and do all kinds of things.
I switched to AnyDesk just so we didn't have that problem anymore. I'd get Rich, and then Rich would be gone for an hour, and I couldn't.
It was funny though, because I remember I was having a problem with a crank trigger or something. He's like, dial into Team Viewer, and I'm like, I'm not dialing into Team Viewer. What are you talking about? So that's the Matt Blasco I know. I mean, there's way more stories than that, but why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background, Matt?
So I started playing with cars when I was younger. Bought my first car when I was 15. My mom and I went and found this Dart sitting behind a shop that had been sitting there for a bunch of years, and went in and talked to the guy, offered him $150 for it for my first car. And he said, "This is going to be your first car?" I said, "Yeah." So he said, "Sure, I'll take it." So I bought that car and started wrenching away at it. Didn't really have a clue. I grew up sort of around an auto shop, busting tires, a little bit of auto stuff. But the funny thing was, I went to go get a quote on an engine for it when I was just turned 16. I wanted to put a big block in it. Well, actually, a small block I was going to put in it at first, and then ended up walking into a machine shop, and I met a real good friend of mine now, actually, is Curtis Halverson. And he had given me a quote, and I was in high school then, and we were just going to do work experience. And I thought, wow, it'd be fun to work in a machine shop. So I actually went back there, asked him if I could have a job, and I worked for him for 4 years in an actual engine machine shop and learned all engine machining, etc. And then after that, I had got out of high school, and
what car was that?
that was my Dart. So I built the engine while I was working there. I even rebuilt a small block Chevy for my other daily driver while I was there, and just it was a good experience working in an engine machine shop because you just know what goes into an engine. People just throw stuff at an engine and they don't actually understand what the actual labor is to machine it, let alone assemble it, like the background processes. Or like when I'll ask somebody, I'll be like, oh, what are your rings gapped out? What do you have for bearing clearance? Like there's a lot of things that go into it, and a lot of people don't understand that when they're tuning something, they might not just be fighting a normal engine. There might be other problems internal, and it's actually identifying those problems internally. And just if you don't have that in-depth understanding, I find sometimes it's really hard to analyze something, because I've had a lot of engines come across the dyno that you're like, wow, there's something internally wrong on this, because what you're expecting as a result isn't coming. And sometimes it's not enough oil pressure, or you'll get something's too tight, just weird stuff sometimes. So
do you know it's a problem when you ask them what their ring gap is and they just say yes?
yes. It depends who's built the engine, because there's a lot of really good builders and there's a lot of really bad builders, and usually the guys that assemble it in their garage, they actually know what they gap their rings at. A lot of guys will actually have their build sheet for it, and it's not so bad to here, 1 second, I'm just gonna kill something in the background here.
Is that Teen Viewer?
Yeah, Team Viewer came up from Rich, sent me the link. I was
using too much data.
So it's just that I find sometimes, like, yeah, people don't have a clue, and it depends who did the machining. And just because somebody says I want something 30 over, you can't just give somebody a block and say I want it 30 over. You have to give them the pistons. They have to set a piston to wall. The problem is like somebody will say have a hyper-eutectic piston, which they're not the strongest, but I've made a lot of power on them, but they won't have enough skirt clearance and they'll be too tight. So as soon as you start throwing a lot of power at it and they start expanding, and then they get too tight in the bore, and also ring gap, like there's so many things that over the years also I've learned a lot is somebody will gap a ring and it'll be like 3 thou too loose. Who cares? You're not going to notice a difference. Like you'll get these guys that, oh, I got to order new rings. It's like, really? Well, go try another cylinder. But, there's a lot of things that you worry about. And then there's a lot of things that just necessarily you're not going to know makes an actual difference at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Just because it's a couple thou too loose, who cares? Piston to wall clearance, a little different, but say ring gap, who cares?
But
a couple.
But 3 thou too tight, 3 thou in the other direction.
Exactly.
That's a whole different
story. Exactly.
My bearing clearance is 3 thou too tight. What?
Right. I got great oil pressure though.
Yeah, right.
So
before I even crank it, it has great oil pressure.
So I'll go on from there. I worked in machine shop, and then I got out of school and was working at family business. And I'm like, wow, this sucks. I don't like working on cars all day and then going home and working on my own. I'm going to go to school. So went to school and actually did computer science because I found it quite easy and did that. I'm an IT consultant for a living is what I actually do. I do mostly back-end server infrastructure. But then I'm also a licensed mechanic. I went and challenged it just to, you get guys around that say, well, you're a tuner, but you're not a mechanic. You don't know. So I just went and wrote here it's kind of like an ASE, but they call it a red seal. So I just became an actual licensed mechanic. So I can also, do inspections for people and such. So at the end of the day, when I was, funny thing, I was in college. I did the first time I ever touched EFI, I was playing with a pair of carburetors on a Roots blower, a pair of Predator carburetors, the worst things ever made. Like
I used to have one of those on a 289.
So I got pissed off at it and I said, no, I'm going to put 3 Mustang throttle bodies on this thing. I said 85-pound Holley injectors, and I built a Mega Squirt 1 way back when. And then the funny thing was I was going to school, so there's still bugs back then, and I'd be looking at the coding. Well, then we'd find little bugs and such. And the cool thing was I could actually read the code, understand it in a more in-depth, and then it kind of went from there. So I started in EFI at around 2000, 2001, back when. And then I had that Mega Squirt, and then there's a local chassis dyno I started hanging around and helping them out because nobody knew how to do fuel injection, and they were working on these big stuff 3s. I'm like, well, this is simple stuff. So funny thing is I was tuning so many big stuff, so I went and bought one because it looked bad on me for not running one. And then we started doing a bit of work with Mike Moran, actually, back in the day with big stuff. And he gave me his whole tune repository because I was like, man, this sucks. There's no auto tuning features. It's hard for data logging to review. So
Matt, did you just say he gave you his suppository?
repository? Yeah, I don't know what you heard. I don't know what you heard, but it went up the wrong ear there or something, or in the wrong hole there for you.
Right.
So anyways, I did a bit of work with Mike Moran, and I said, well, I know a guy that writes some of the software for the Mega Log Viewer and Tuner Studio, and really great guy. Ended up got him all this stuff, and we reverse engineered the big stuff so we could actually auto tune it, which was great. So the funny thing is, years later, the owner of Big Stuff ended up getting a hold of this guy. And now it's Phil Tobin. I don't know if you've ever met him. Great guy. He's done some drag and drives with the Corvette. Anyways, ended up working with him, and he ended up actually writing all the new software for Big Stuff, all the new stuff for a Gen 4 and everything. So it's funny where it came from to where it was. And, years later, I had went and talked to John Meany, and he's like, oh, hey, you're Matt. And he was pretty thankful to me because we had talked on the phone a bit. And if I ever kind of needed something, he would help me out. But then from the Big Stuff, I went over to the Mega Squirt again after a while because it was getting better and better, and went into an MS3. I had an MS2, but then I had an MS3 Pro and started going into that. But then kind of once you learn a Mega Squirt, every aftermarket fuel injection is pretty easy. Like, it's all the same theory, all the same tables. It's just a different way of looking at something. And I think as long as you understand the concepts of it, every table's just labeled a little differently. But to know, like, I respect a lot of the OEMs. When you look at OEM tables, they spend millions of dollars to you don't get these morons. Like, they make better idiots every day, so the OEM has to compensate for it. So like when you're looking at Dodge, it's been an SD forever, which is what both your guys run off of. It's not a mass air system, your speed density. Well, a lot of those correction tables that the OEMs use are written in warranty. They're made to repeat. So I'll use a lot of OEM tables in aftermarket injection just to make it repeat, like in Rich's car, where we'll go up and down a mountain range, drive all the way to Florida, and the barometric pressure will change, the temperature will change, everything will change, and it'll track within a couple percent the whole time. The only thing that I find that ever throws you for a loop is you get fuel temperature. As soon as fuel temperature goes, which I would like to have the input, which OEMs do, because your fuel density changes as temperature rises, it gets thinner. So then you need to add to the pulse width. Well, that's one thing that when you're running really low, and you do notice it on Riches, you can watch the O2 sensor crap it a little more just as it gets thinner. So you end up with fuel injection. There's, I guess it depends your tangent of what we want to go to. But when it comes to EFI, I've touched a lot of stuff. I've been to Bonneville. I've been down to, tuned on the Street Outlaw stuff down in Cottonwood, Alabama. I've been everywhere out to the Vancouver Island out east, kind of everywhere tuning. Kind of touch everything, done boats, cars, land speed stuff. That's another interesting thing because it's quite amazing how off you can be on a drag car, and it's kind of funny versus you look at the guys that the tuner has never really tuned at Bonneville, and you hear about the 1 to 2 mile mark, it starts shooting ducks, and all of a sudden it goes silent. And you're like, oh yeah, that guy doesn't know. So that's where those OEM tables and temperature modifiers. And I was talking to Rich yesterday about a friend of ours, Blair. He had a LSA motor that has an OEM ECU, but we had looked at the intake air temperature table and we're like, well, why doesn't it do anything with timing? What if your intercooler doesn't turn on? Well, lo and behold, he was at a drag and drive. His intercooler pump, his fuse blew. His intake air went freaking nuclear, and it pulled all the timing back out, and it slowed down a little bit. But then he was looking at the log. He's like, well, why was it so, it didn't seem as fast. Well, he looked at the intake air and he's like, holy crap. And he was just running like a pump gas with a little bit of octane additive, nothing wow. And he's like, wow, it didn't blow up. It didn't burn. Like, I'm quite surprised. Well, as long as you have those tables set up properly, there's no excuse. Like I said, you got to compensate for all these better idiots or just mistakes that we make. Like, I don't know how many times Rich has, done something maybe not deliberately, but just forgot.
I mean, like 15 degrees off in the timing, and it
exactly.
But it didn't really stay together. But
it got you home.
I will own that one. Yes.
Well, the best one was I said, "Hey, Rich, did you check your timing?" Well, yeah, I did. Well, wait. And then he at a gas station checked it, and but no, you meet so many cool guys. I'm
pretty sure I figured that one out myself.
Yeah, timing light after I kind of said, "Hey, Rich, when's the last time you checked your timing?" But we all do it. The problem is just we always assume stuff, and that's always our downfall when it comes to things. Like, we're just always so busy that on the drag and drive stuff, doesn't matter what car you have, if you don't have it written down and you don't have somebody double checking your work, sometimes you see so many problems happen, right? It's like, I know I've worn Rich out. Rich has came on drag and drives with me, and we'll always ask each other, did you do this? Did you do this? Or we'll double check our work sometimes, because when you're going really fast, stuff happens so quickly that you can die, really, if you do something wrong.
It's funny you say that, because I know you're a pilot. Most people may not know that, and you're training and working on your instrument rating and all that type of stuff. But what's the one thing you always use in aviation? It's a checklist.
Yeah.
And I come from an aviation background, more from the maintenance side of things, but I'm also a pilot. And on my drag and drive setup, and my co-pilot, he'll laugh when he hears this, but I have checklists, and we go through them together when we're done, double checking each other, making sure we've all done everything. And in fact, right now, he reminded me I have to update the checklist for this year because we've made a few changes to the car that
you live and die by a checklist. That's for sure. Like,
100%.
Even though I know that checklist off by heart, I pull it out and I do it every time I get in that plane. And, before you land, when you take off, like, there's always just certain things that you do.
BC Gump.
Yeah, Gumps, right? Like, that's always, I have that. That's something that's so ingrained in my head. And the funny thing is like, you get into aviation, the one thing that I've really learned is when you're in a panic situation or you just get stressed, you fall to your lowest level of training, period. So that's where when you rehearse, it's like practicing shifting in your car.
It becomes rote.
If you sit there and practice, and it's like, I daily drive a stick car. So, and I have another stick car that I raced at Drag Week in 18, but like, I daily drive a stick. So I'll hop in a friend's car. I'll do somebody's car on the dyno, and I'll go dyno a Hellcat. I'll go out and power shift the thing, or I can bang gears pretty quick just because I do it all day. And my muscle memory is there for it. A TR6060 is a TR6060 in a way, right?
Well, that's the only reason you're on here.
Yeah.
You have a stick.
It's a sticky subject.
Yes.
Don't get them started.
Yeah,
Let
you don't want
me back you up.
that'll be bad punishment. Yeah,
Well, we can synchronize our answers.
you're right.
Oh man.
Oh,
So let me back up a bit. So yeah, a testament to Matt's tuning on my car. Like I don't remember the last time I changed the tuning on my car, other than for the track surface, like pulling timing or something like that. I really don't touch the air fuel ratio. And why don't you talk a little bit about um, running my car on Barrow compared to speed density? Because I know that Holly doesn't have that option, but and not very many ECUs actually have a barometric.
so
Um,
yeah, the way that your car used to be set up, just old school way, was speed density, and then you'd have a barometric correction table, which is it's usually I think it's 3.5 or no 6.5% per 10 kPa or something. I forget what the table is. I haven't really. I'd have to look back on some tunes, but every 10 kPa you drop, I think it's 6.5% or so is what it is. You add actually, because when you go full throttle at sea level, you go to 100 kPa. So if you're thinking of a Holly table and you're in kPa or say PSI, when you go full throttle, it should read 0 PSI. You should be at atmospheric pressure, which is 0, which is actually 14.7. Well, where we live,
On a standard day.
on a standard day, which pilots, if when you set your altimeter, you know exactly how that is. But barometric pressure really influences it. So where we live, our barometric pressure is around 90 kPa, and you don't realize, every 10 kPa is 1.7 psi. So you're at 13 psi.
I'm laughing because if I'm not mistaken, at my house, it's like 67 or something.
Yeah, so that's the funniest thing actually is, Rich's car, we went over that Eisenhower tunnel one time, Rich and I, and we got over the tunnel and I'm like, wow, it's tracking really good. Like it's holding the percentage. And I took a picture. I think the barrel was 63 kPa, I think, Rich,
Well,
which is,
the tunnel is
oh yeah,
about 12,200 feet.
yeah. So it
yeah.
was really low barrel and it tracked. But the funny thing is that you don't realize is evap, when guys shut evap off, evap actually, they pressure the tank up so the fuel doesn't boil. Because as you
Yep.
go up in height, that's why when you go on Rocky Mountain Race Week, your fuel boils and they have these vapor lock problems because all liquids will boil a lot sooner. So when you get it hot, you'll instant vapor lock. Well, Rich's car, as soon as we go down, it started getting hot and boom, vapor lock. And we're scratching our heads thinking it's the pump. Well, then we started thinking afterwards, I'm like, man, we could have just closed loop control, put some pressure in your tank and use your boost controller to hold zero, hold it at atmosphere, which at 14.7, put a couple pounds in there and we wouldn't have had a problem. But
So
the OEMs, what they've done actually is old school. They used to run them at 43. Now everything's at 58 psi because it doesn't the higher pressure you have in the rail, and that's why they went to a standard 58 because it's a lot harder to boil and vapor lock the fuel. Where older cars had that problem.
So if I can actually add something to that,
Mhm.
I had this happen as a happy accident, but before I figured out fuel temperature deal, I'd blow through 120 pounds of ice a day, keeping my fuel tank cool. And I won't go too much into detail in it, but what ended up happening was I have a tip over valve. It's a safety thing
Yeah.
in the tank, but it sits horizontally. And as the tank would get hot, it would be venting fast enough that it would seat that thing. And I could run that thing down to like 2 gallons in the tank. God knows what the temperature was, but it would pressurize the tank enough that it wouldn't boil over. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. Like I felt like a super genius. And I'm like, oh, the OEMs already do this.
No, that's
but it was a happy accident and it's worked out great actually. But you're right. You could use a boost controller. You've got onboard air. You could totally put a couple of pounds in that tank and it'll make all the difference.
The option, though. I guess the thing is, how often do you ever going to run into that? But so, anyways, with the barometric pressure, there's normal barrel correction, which on speed density, they'll have a fuel modifier. And the thing with the fuel modifiers, they do it on the raw number, the base number they add to, and then you add your modifiers of, say, intake air temperature will influence your air density. You have lots of different things, fuel temperature, your intake valve temperature. GM actually keeps track of that because when the fuel hits it, it steams off. So they actually know, and they change some of the fueling because they know exactly how quick. And OEMs, they have what's called this is like X-Tow. It's wall wetting. It's how quick that when you hammer it, and that's why you have an accelerator pump on a carb, it wets all those intake ports. It's how quick it gases off, because at different engine temperatures and different run times, it's going to gas off quicker. That's a whole nother OEM thing. But with the way, like on a Holly, it's kind of hard to do, and I've been bugging Devin Vanderhoof a bit about it to kind of get into their ears that, hey, you should do a pressure ratio based, which is what Dodge and a lot of the OEMs actually do. So with pressure ratio based, or Mega Squirt, actually, it's called percent barrel. So it's load index speed density, which is funny as fast fuel injection did way back when. A lot of the OEMs, Motec, there's a lot of ECUs out there that do it. I'm running an M-Tron now too on one of my cars. You can do a complete load base. So what it'll be is when you're at 100 kPa and you go full throttle, like 100 kPa, which is barrel, like when you go full throttle, 0 PSI at sea level, it's 100%. But if we're at the top of the Eisenhower Tunnel and it's 60 kPa, when you go full throttle, all you have available is 60 kPa, which is, that's all the atmosphere. When you open the throttle blade, it's going to be the same pressure inside the engine as outside the engine. Well, if you look at your VE table and you look at that 60 area, you're like, well, what the heck? Like, so when you do that, that's why you have that barrel corrector and you actually add fuel. It's opposite on a fuel injector, because at 60 kPa, you'd have to add 6, 12, 20, would be 24, 25%-ish fuel at that level, because it's only going to go to that 60 kPa. So that's why you actually have to add, even though it's kind of, it takes away, but you never get to those higher numbers. Now, on a pressure ratio based system, which, like I said, a lot of the OEMs do, or even the aftermarkets can do, it'll instantly say, okay, well, 60 is 100%. So it'll fuel at 100%. And it knows, okay, 60 kPa is where it's available, so it re-indexes. So then if you were at, like, I guess the better number is when we're doing, say, 90 kPa here, and you're at, say, 80 kPa, you were actually at like 87.5 kPa is what 87.5% load. So it's, what it does is whatever your barrel is, that's your 100% load point, and then it re-indexes it all through. So that way it keeps your fueling a lot more dead on. So like Rich, when he goes over a mountain pass and he goes full throttle, now my Dodge car, when you go full throttle, some don't have onboard barrel, Hellcats do, but these old ones, when you go full throttle, it'll relearn your barometric pressure, because it knows when you go past a certain throttle that it's going to show what the barometric pressure is, and it'll do fine tuning. So a lot of the newer and the OEMs started doing that. They'll still do mass air, but then they'll have modifiers on it too. But most of the speed density stuff, it's better to do a pressure ratio based that way, because it'll keep your fueling more consistent without having to do a barometric correction to it, because it'll automatically 100% is 100%. But when you're at 80 kPa, 80 is 100. So 70 isn't 70. 70 is like 85%. So it's simple math.
And Bill, there's a test. There's a test on this.
Yes,
You have to repeat
yes.
it back to us in your language here.
I'm taking notes.
So what it does is it'll re-index it. So when it knows that, say, if you only have 80 kPa available to you when you go full throttle, it goes to 100% on the fueling table at that. So what it'll do is when you're driving, it'll real time. If you're going up a hill, it'll keep it. So if you're doing something like Pikes Peak, that's how you can keep your fueling consistent going up Pikes Peak, because it'll real-time barrel correct and re-index your fuel table. Now, your ignition table, you don't really want to run a barometric based, because 10 pounds is 10 pounds. It doesn't matter. But if you're at 60 kPa, say, like you can run a lot more timing in it because you don't have quite, you can run that timing to make the power out of it. So a lot of,
So if I hear you right, what you're saying is you should just floor your car a lot so
yes,
that it
yes,
recalibrates.
yes. When it's OEM, that's the funny thing is if you have a little bit of an older OEM car, if you floor it, it'll actually relearn it, and you'll get it. It'll actually might get the fuel economy, or your learning will go away because it'll actually learn the new barometric pressure. So
Awesome. So actually, I do have a question. So it sounds like what you're saying is, and you said a lot, but not a lot. See if I can get this right. Not every ECU can compensate and do that. There's only certain ones, and maybe it's the more upper end ones. Like the Holly won't do that, the barrel correction.
you can do a modifier table, but the problem is when you do it, you're not in the base equation. Like if you think of brackets on an actual equation, you're applying it to a modified value, one that already had its different like intake air temperature, like ideal gas law.
So it's kind of
it's
kind of like telling a friend to tell a friend rather than you're directly going straight, right? You have to tell one program to make it modify another program as compared to just it's already in there. You don't have to wait for the modifier. It'll happen quicker. It's less computing power to make it happen faster.
Yeah, it is. And you can still do it. There's ways, like I've done kind of an artificial way on a Holly with that. I think they might have it in the works because they do have a barrow part on it. I've done where I've had a barrow table in it. The only time you have to worry about it though is if you're switching, like the best thing is like Bonneville. If the barometric pressure, like something like that, you need the fueling. If the O2 sensor fails and you're running halfway through the run, you want the fueling to be as consistent as it can be. So it'll always compensate. So when you fire that car up, you know it's dead on. Like if Rich's O2 sensor fails, I don't care. He can go take it down the track. It doesn't need to be a closed loop cowboy because I know the fueling is going to be.
What about mine?
On.
What about my car?
Well, that's a different story. But usually when it faults, it will go to zero. But you should have some learn in that table. That's the one thing that Holly has is it has that learn table that'll kind of compensate. So if you're going up and down mountains, but you don't really want to have too much learn because if you have an actual mechanical problem like a miss, it'll learn that, think it's lean, start throwing fuel at it, and it'll screw you in a way. So Hollies are good and bad. They're not, say, my first choice, but I tune probably more Hollies than anything. But there's different ways. You can skin a cat with, many different ways. Every ECU you can make work. And everybody always asks me, what's the best ECU? Well, it's the one that your tuner knows the best. Or, if I had to choose between ECUs, there's so many companies out there, and I've worked with a bunch of them. There's a lot of really good tuners out there. Like I've learned from some really good OEM tuners, from Dodge actually, asking theoretical questions.
It's always about Dodge.
Dodge is exactly because their speed density, right? That's where it's great. And they came out with OEM forced induction stuff. But though Ford's, every different brand, like I love Ford computers because they had OEM wideband.
Did you hear that, Rich?
2011.
Did you hear that, Rich?
No,
he loves Fords. That's what he said.
No, I got this. I got a miss in my stupid Ford. I got to figure out actually my stupid daily driver Coyote. It makes 3,000 horsepower, but only runs on 7 cylinders when it's cold. So, the problem with Coyotes, right?
Well, they do that so it heats the catalytic converter up quicker.
Right. No, that's if you had some. We're in Canada, remember? We don't have that EPA crap.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so the best way to fuel is that pressure ratio or load index speed density. It keeps your fueling as consistent. You don't want to do your timing though. Your timing's your timing. 10 pounds is 10 pounds. So Rich is wherever he's at, his timing's always going to be the same, depending on what boost it is. But the thing is if he's targeting his closed loop, he wants 15 pounds. When you're up at high altitude, you might actually be making 17 pounds. Now I've been tuning a lot of snowmobiles lately and playing with those. Well, They just maintain a pressure ratio. They target a pressure, and that's what it targets a pressure. So maybe down low, you're only making 2 pounds, but up top, you might be making 6 pounds because you don't have the atmosphere. It's just trying to target the same value throughout. So
If it wants 130 kPa, it's going to make 130 kPa irrelevant of barometric pressure.
yeah, but the thing is at a higher altitude with a turbo, you make more horsepower because you have less barometric pressure pushing in, so you have less back pressure. Therefore, you have more mass flow through the engine. So the higher altitude you have, the better off it is because you don't back up the exhaust as much. And that's where it's funny on a Ski-Doo, they'll pull out a pound of boost at really high because it gets that much more efficient to keep the clutch in because they're like a CVT clutch, but to keep it so it's making the same power through. Where with us, you're making 15 pounds where Bill's at versus 15 pounds where we're at. We're making more power up there, and that's where depending your altitude and chassis dynos, correction's kind of correction, but on a forced induction, a turbo, when you go high altitude, actually helps. That's why you look at those airplanes that have turbos, right? The turbo normalized stuff, they get up there and they just haul, right?
So let me ask a couple of questions. You're kind of like herding cats, Matt. So we got to kind of keep you in the rest here. But I have a dyno question.
Yep.
So what kind of dyno do you have or do you use? And what do you prefer if you could choose any?
So
why?
I go to a lot of different shops and work with other tuners. There's local guys that, depending, they're not good with some ECUs and vice versa. I have a lot of different tuners that I work with that, like, the first thing I've kind of, not the first thing, but one thing you really realize is you don't know everything and you're never going to. And I have a lot of really good friends that are other tuners that I can reach out to and ask questions. Everybody has a different dyno and they all spit out different numbers. I don't care if they're the same brand. So I run a Dynocom. I've had it it's a Canadian made one. It's not their latest stuff. I like the hardware for it. Software, the new stuff is better than what it is. It does what I need. I just like it because it's eddy loaded. I can put a load on it. And that's the thing when you're looking for a chassis dyno is you want to put it on a loaded dyno. If you're an N8 car, you don't necessarily need it with that as much. Like a carburetor is going to pretty much, it doesn't care with a bunch of load or not, because when you go full throttle, it's just going to go to atmosphere. So your fueling's not going to change much. Now your timing that's the one thing that I always explain to people is if you don't have a loaded dyno, it's kind of like revving your car in neutral. You can have the thing way off or have too much timing and it doesn't care. But as soon as you load it and slow it down, you want to ramp the RPM to simulate what it's going to do with the track, the RPM per second. So if you know through top gear, it gains 200 RPM every second or 500 RPM a second. What I'll usually tell somebody is go look at your data log. Let's see how long it took you to go through, say, your top gear to sweep from what it drops to through, and we can simulate that on the dyno. So then that way, the thing I always do is I'll try and overload them a little bit and slow them down to not quite, it'd be nice to steady state everything, but you just want it to sweep at least the speed that it's going to go down the track, or a little slower if you can. Then that way when
it's called a warranty tune, right?
Yes. Because I'll get guys that they'll put it on and they won't load it, and you'll see these dyno runs on the net that are just a quick zip where, I don't know if you've ever watched Rich's car. I load the piss out of that thing. And then that way, like, he goes to the track. And the funny thing that I was saying to Rich the other day is these guys, you'll miss a gear, they'll get back in gear and they'll get back into it and they've slowed down and all of a sudden they're lugging it. Well, if you didn't have that thing tuned on a dyno with a load at that level, you're going to be pinging the crap out of it, knock the bearings or hurt a piston with it.
Or break a rod.
Or break a rod, anything, right? So,
we'll get into that one a little bit.
when you load something, you just want to make sure the sweep rate, and you'll see guys on the engine dyno, they'll set a sweep rate when they're tuning it, which is, there's a lot of really good engine dynos. You don't need necessarily a chassis dyno. It's nice to, like, I spent a lot of time, Rich came to Todd Goodwin's place, and we spent a lot of time with nice, slow, accelerated, like a slow ramp through, so you get real timing when you pull that plug out. you know that timing mark is that timing mark. Now, the funny thing is Bonneville, when you go put a car out on Bonneville, that's ultimate load, slow acceleration. And that's where those OEM type tables for, say, intake air versus, or when your engine coolant temperature goes higher, say if it's 160 you race at, but all of a sudden you're at 190, that 30 degrees of temperature, your combustion temperature, the combustion chamber temperature goes up a lot. So that flame's going to travel a lot faster when it's hotter. So the thing is, when you have it, you'll want to pull timing if you're running hotter versus what your normal, because you'll detonate because the flame travels faster because it'll be more efficient as it gets hotter. That's why the OEMs run hotter temperature thermostats now.
So let me ask another question in relation to timing and tuning, because when I first met you, you rode in my car for like 20 minutes and I couldn't believe the difference in the way it drove with the changes you made. But one of the conversations that you and I have had is you see a lot of people in different areas posting timing tables and stuff like this, and you just see these lines. They look like a staircase.
Flat timing. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
hilarious
And
'cause
you and I have talked about this because I was frankly a little concerned when you started messing with my timing tables. I was like, dude, that can't be right. You can't be asking for 27 degrees with 20 pounds of boost. But you were like, yeah, but that's at 7,400 RPM. And the timing needs to go up as RPM. Like, just dive into that
you're
because,
so yeah, and that
In
goes
a
along.
really basic level, though.
So
yeah,
Level.
So this
yeah,
goes
yeah.
along with the loading, sweeping the rate so it's accelerating through. So when you have a flat timing, I'll see guys go, 14 degrees on a turbo LS stock bottom end. And then when they short shift it, well, I knocked the bottom end out of it or it chucked a rod. Well, yeah, 14 degrees is too much at 4,000 RPM, but it wasn't too much at, say, 6,000 RPM. But if you were, say, 10 degrees at that and 16 degrees up there, you'd have more average timing across. But if you short shift it, so timing is a function of RPM. Piston dwells at top dead a lot. So say at 4,000 RPM versus 6,000 RPM. I forget the math, but just as that, you'll probably spend half the dwell time at top dead at 6,000 RPM than you will 4,000 RPM. The piston will pull away a lot quicker. So you can light that a lot sooner. So then that way it doesn't stub, because what it is you're trying to light it as it comes around and then use all that power to push it down. Well, if you let it off too soon, it won't go down. It'll hit the crank and stub its toe. But when you're at a higher RPM, it's going to run away quicker. So you'll know it's going to go away quicker so you can light it off a little sooner. Where at low RPM, it's going to dwell at the top dead a little longer. And then when you have too much timing, that's when you have a problem. Now, air
So
density,
let's cut it off there because that was pretty simple. That's good.
So air
That's good. I
density
know.
does have, so on your car, when you're a high vacuum, which you have a little air in there, you don't have a full combustion chamber, you're under vacuum, you can pile a lot of timing in, because that thing, you need to light it a lot sooner, because it's not going to be a really quick bang because there's a lot less air in the cylinder. So you can light it off way sooner to get the full advantage of it.
So you're talking like light load, like cruising down the highway.
Light load. And timing is always a function of RPM, no matter what. And you'll know with a stick car, go stick it in fourth gear and take off from a light, or put it in third gear and take off from a light. You hear them ping, and it's always, when I'll put something on a dyno that I know somebody's got a stick car, I'll go steady state. I'll put it in fourth gear and 1,000 RPM, and I'll put my foot to the floor and make sure that it goes through. And like, you look at OEM timing tables, well, yeah, it's single digits timing, sometimes negative in those areas. So what you'll do is you want to steady state that stuff through, because you'll ping it to death. And it's no different in a race car. If you short shift it, or like a stick car, you grab a gear, or you grab say you're going to third, you miss third, so you grab it right into fourth, and the clutch locks up. Well, if your timing's wrong and you steady state that, you'll knock the bearings out of it, or you'll rattle the pistons. Octane, high octane fuel like a C16, it's a lot harder to detonate, but still it's going to stub it. You have a lot more forgiving that way, but you're not necessarily doing yourself many favors, with too much timing in those areas. But
Okay. So I think you probably answered a couple of questions we had on our list here. But maybe dive in. So how is tuning different for a stick car versus an auto car? What I'm getting is it needs to be way more precise
Yeah,
with a stick car
you don't have a
than
fudge
auto.
factor because you think a converter car always has slip, so it's almost like a rubber band. You're never gonna
Yeah.
completely, unless you have a lockup converter, you're never gonna have those high load, constant, like overloaded. A converter is always gonna flash up. So these guys that have flat timing, they, yeah, sometimes it'll kind of mask it because when you throw it through, it'll just flash into the converter. And if you're only brushing across that area, you're not going to have a problem. But when on a stick car, when you dwell across that area, you don't have that slip because usually the only time you're slipping is off the line. When you're in second, third, fourth gear, you're not really slipping through. So when
Yeah.
you grab those gears, you really got to watch the timing of where it's through because it's going to lug through those or at a higher. That's the thing with yours with timing. You'll look at something that maybe on your car they would have said, oh, it's 24 degrees. They'll put 24 from 3,000 to 7,000. It's like,
Right.
right. And it's like, if all of a sudden you're at, 3,000 or 4,000 RPM and it's at that, it's too much timing. But at that RPM, maybe you'll be 17 degrees. And then up top, you'll be 27 and you might pick up 10 degrees through that RPM band. The best places to look sometimes are those, is like I said, OEM tables. Like you'll look at some of the Fords, the Cobras are really good, or you'll look at a Hellcat.
Oh, he didn't say Dodge, Bill.
He just said Fords are really good.
He
I heard
said-
him say
Well,
it.
the OEMs, right? OEMs. I always praise OEMs with that. Now they have emissions on some of their other stuff, but like you look at it, timing as RPM. So you get these stick shift Hellcats. They can make all the boost, put it in fifth gear, and put your foot to the floor. Well, that timing table's right. That's where that when you have that flat 24. Well, when you shove your foot in it, that thing's dead. Because
So speaking of the Hellcats, I'd like you to talk about this just briefly. But somebody that knows how to drive the car. So we're not talking about the warranty tune, because you've told me about you go in and you tune some of these Hellcats and stuff, and you pick up like an insane amount of power on a stock car, modifying the or the timing tables, but it has to be the person who's not going to put it in fifth gear and floor it and lug it. So talk about that and the power you're picking up, because it was like 100 something horsepower. If I'm not mistaken.
I'm not going to actually know. You can still put it in fifth gear. The big thing with those is making sure that you don't desensitize the knock sensors, because you'll have it where the knock sensors will be your friend, but the timing table, it's those higher RPM where you can pick up with that. But sometimes they'll run them too lean, actually, instead of too rich. So you can put more timing in and more fuel. So that's the other thing, is you'll get a guy that'll run 12.5 to 1 air fuel under boost. They're like, oh, it's great. And then they'll start putting timing in. Well, if you ran it, say at 12.0, you might be able to get another 2 degrees timing in it because it has more stable combustion and make more power. And that's the thing is I'd rather run something a little rich and have the combustion stable. Now, I'm not racing pro stock. In some of those ones, it is worth a tiny bit, but for 1 or 2 horsepower, air fuel. In some instances, it depends the combustion chamber. It depends the efficiency of the heads. But running it a smidge rich, the thing that matters is having the proper timing in it. You can usually sweep air fuel, say a quarter to half point, and it won't really change. So I would rather run at a half point rich, because you're looking at a sum of 4 or 8 cylinders. You're not looking at what the actual one cylinder is doing. Like I've tuned engines with 8 wide bands on, and you'd be amazed, one's 12, one's 12.5, one's 11, and your sum of it is, maybe it says 11.8. Well, we're just looking at an average of it. So by looking, say on yours, just running it a smidgen rich, but the proper timing value, that's where a lot of the OEM stuff sometimes will be a little under timed, or they're doing stuff for emissions, where you can run it a little richer and pile the timing in and settle down those knock sensors. They're running them lean because of emissions and also to not kill the catalytic converters. So that's where, when you get rid of the cats, and well, Rich has a cat there already.
I see that.
When you don't have the cats, the other thing though is you look at catalytic converters, and sometimes getting mileage is is it's leaning isn't when you're under a light load, yeah, you can run it extremely lean, but when you're running a steady state down the road, sometimes putting more timing in and running it just a smidge richer, you can pile more timing in and pull back that throttle, and you'll actually have less air in there, which means less fuel, but it's a richer mixture. You actually get better fuel economy being richer than you do leaner, because that leaner, you actually need to add more fuel to it, because if you only need to make 50 horsepower, it's easier to make 50 horsepower at 14.0 than it does 15.0. You need less air if you're running a richer mixture. So that's where efficiency, the CPA, the way that they do things, I would more like to see where they strive for efficiency in an engine and not worry about emissions, because your sum of emissions over that actual tank or the life of the car would be less, because you would burn less fuel upstream and downstream emissions by just making it more efficient than worrying about what instantaneously comes out of a pipe like VW did. VW wasn't a bad thing. They actually increased the mileage 10 to 15 miles to the gallon. That's a diesel, but at the end of the day, they actually save the environment more because they're burning that much less fuel.
Yeah.
But
so I have another question. Stick versus auto tuning. But for stick shift, talk about starting line spooling strategies. Low timing, how low, add fuel, like whatever. Like, talk to me about that. And then versus like the Holly has the boost builder function. Like, maybe dive into that versus doing an advanced table for building
so
boost.
the
With a
boost
stick.
builder on a Holly works pretty good. The problem is like on an automatic, you got to watch how much timing you pull, because you'll kill the torque because you're running up against a load. Where I watch these guys, they'll hit this boost builder and all of a sudden they'll kill it and then come back. It's like where you could have not had the boost builder aggressive and just let it bounce off the two-step, would have maybe done better. With automatics, there's a lot of different ways to do it. With a stick car, you just rattle it. Just rattle the freaking thing against the two-step is a lot of it. Pull the timing back and throw the fuel at it, because you want it to be igniting in the exhaust to put the heat in the exhaust. So there's different ways of doing it. On a Holly, the boost builder does work, but usually what I'll do is, Rich, you're getting your buddies there. um, on a Holly, you can make it where, well, any ECU, if you can retard the timing and make it explode in the exhaust, you're going to instant spool. I know with yours, Rich, we go down to 10 degrees and you start going into those zeros or negatives and pop it in the exhaust, you'll instant spool a turbo car. Now, every ECU has a different way of doing it. You can have a sequential spark cut that'll cut it in firing order, or you'll have the random spark cut that'll pick on certain cylinders. The best way I always say is a sequential way of doing it, because then it kind of doesn't let any cylinder pile up more than another.
It evens out the damage.
It does. It evens it out. It sure does. And Holly's, they're pretty good because you can get them pretty tight with their rev limiters. Sometimes on a stick car, if you can just get RPM with it, you're cutting time, like you're cutting the timing, like cutting spark, you don't even necessarily have to retard the fuel depending on the engine, because it's just going to throw raw fuel, and then the next time it lights, it's just going to light it in the exhaust.
Well, I know on mine, I don't use the boost builder. I have an advanced table, and I literally pull out 25 degrees of timing.
Yeah.
And it spools. I can make whatever boost I need on the line.
Yeah, it pulls out, but then when it hits your target boost, it puts it back in. So in that way, it kind of, once it has that compressor lit, it's going to hold it at that. That's where you do these, like on a Holly, you can do an advanced table, be nice, because it's not going to pull it back so hard. Where a boost builder, sometimes it's easier to visualize on an advanced table than it does the boost builder. I find the boost builder is kind of just the basic easy, and more getting into an advanced table, even on an automatic. You can.
Well, one thing I notice on the cars that use the boost builder, like they're kind of like popping out of the pipes, like Chris Hines' car, versus mine is more like boom, 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 like it's popping, but it's not that rapid, like kind of popping. You know what I mean?
Yeah, not as much shotgun, because what it is, though, I think that might be is you can kind of load up, having the thing is clean and ready to go at the line when you let go of the clutch, where the engine doesn't have to clean itself out. That's where I say having a sequential spark cut, but like how you have it, you pull it out, but then as soon as you hit target boost, you have the timing in. As soon as you let go of that clutch and it's gone, it's already at that timing and the engine's kind of ready to go. Where if it's on that boost builder or it's already pulling negative timing and all of a sudden you dump the clutch, it has to go. Now everything's happening really quick, but it has to go from that low to high timing all of a sudden. I've seen it where you'll get these cars, and it's especially too is knowing what your launch boost is target versus your first one in the table. And that was Chris's car. He was at the track. He's like, why does this thing fall on its face? Well, if your launch target's at say 8 pounds, and then when you let go of it, your first number is 6 pounds, well, it's going to instantly dump your gates, where you want to make sure what your launch is versus what your first one on is the same or more. So it's not.
Well, thanks for helping.
Yeah, I know that was Death Week actually. But I'm sorry. But it's just those little things that sometimes I'll look at tunes and it'll just be, the problem is everything has to work together. Now, when you're doing spark cuts, it's loading those cylinders up. And like I said, the sooner you can get it to your launch boost and have the thing cleaned up and have the engine work, because you'll have residual fuel in the cylinders, you'll have residual fuel in the exhaust. The sooner you clean the thing up, the better it's going to be off the line. And it's going to, because on yours, it'll have closed loop. Sometimes it'll chase that little bit of residual where you can have it when you let go, it's got all that power there, where like Rich's, as soon as he kills his, it instantly is there, and it's only cutting. You'll have it cut for a split second, but some smaller engines, you have to really retard the timing. On the larger ones, you don't have to as much. The thing you got to worry about is, you're heating up your exhaust side, you're putting heat into your coolant, right? Because you're not necessarily the heat's not pushing the piston down, it's lighting your turbo, so it's going into your cooling system too at the same time with that. But
okay,
there's different ways of doing it. It's just, you'll look at say M-Trons, they'll have a torque number. Like OEMs use a lot of this torque modeling, which is airflow, and the torque stuff is really interesting with OEMs, and they're doing it in a lot of the aftermarket stuff, the higher end, which it's a really good way to model it, especially when you're doing traction control. But that's a whole nother episode in itself.
So let's talk about hardware preferences. So Rich, you want to go through some of those questions?
You want me to read the first one about do you did
your cat mute you?
No,
he looks frozen.
What's happening, Meow?
So do you have a favorite platform? Like, of course, a small block Ford.
How many times have you had that apart now? Is it got Zeus fasters on the pan, or is it?
Yeah. I'm learning every time. Oh boy!
It's funny. You wanted me to ask about Fords. My computer quit working. It was weird. I had to take the bottom off the computer and do some adjusting, and now it's working. I don't know what
perfect. Oh boy! Yeah, you guys got me there. Good enough.
Yeah, let's. So, what widebands do you prefer on aftermarket? Let's not talk about the OEM. Like, if you're gonna recommend putting some widebands on.
So every aftermarket. Are you drinking moonshine, Bill?
Yep, that's right.
You look like a shiner. So you'll get every aftermarket is an OEM sensor. So you have a 4.2, a 4.9, or you'll have a new ADV sensor that's out, and then you have an NTK, which is a more methanol based. The 4.2 are more robust. They're older school. You have to usually calibrate those. The 4.9 is more auto calibrating. They have a pump cell in them that they'll know their pressure. They can just auto calibrate. An NTK, you have to calibrate manually, just like a 4.2.
So doesn't the Holly, like the Dominator, comes with NTK sensors, right?
Well, it depends. You have an option of them, right? And then they have from what I've told, you can buy the ones, but they'll have resistance values that are built in to those sensors that are for it. So that kind of run it on the same. Now it depends what fuel you're running. If you're running an alcohol based fuel, you run an NTK, which I usually like a Ballinger wideband, which has kind of been relabeled to a bunch of different places, but Ballinger is one of the best because they make CAN bus ones that you can CAN bus into most of your aftermarket computers.
And when you say alcohol, that includes methanol, right?
That's methanol. I'm ethanol. I still say you can, like, you don't necessarily need an NTK sensor with it.
Okay.
You can run a 4.2 or a 4.9. When you're tuning E85, I usually use a gas scale anyways because that's what I'm used to when I'm tuning those. And you'll run them quite rich. I love E85. Pump E85 is a ticket. It's cheap. I'm going to run my Dart on E85 actually is what I'm going to do on my new setup with that twin turbo Gen 3 Hemi just because it's so cheap. It's quite forgiving and it's almost as good as methanol, not quite, but you're 30% more, so you don't need to run twice the injector with that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but you'll have 4249. There's a lot of the wide bands are really good. Even the AEMs are good. Zetronics is a nice wide band that you can run that they also have CAN bus. There's a lot of the aftermarket ones. I think the thing about any of the aftermarket wide bands is just doing the proper calibration on them on a schedule when you're running the ones that won't auto calibrate themselves. The Innovate stuff isn't bad. Like I know you've ran Innovate for quite a while, Rich, but then you've ran other ones. They do make firmware updates for some of the early Innovates that'll make the actual heating, like that's what kills them is you never want to run a wideband unheated in the exhaust, and you always want to have it from like a 10 o'clock to a 2 o'clock so you never have humidity. Like you'll have moisture because water is a product of combustion. You don't want it pooling in your wideband, so if you can, you want it to even be at an angle in the exhaust. If this is your exhaust pipe, you kind of you'll have it at a top, but you even want it a little bit of an angle. You don't want it if the exhaust is flowing this way. You don't want it this way. You want it just kind of that, so it more drafts it. So you're not going to get raw fuel or water hitting the little pump cell in there because you can get lead deposits or it'll plug it up. So what you're going to want to do is just wideband placement versus a controller is probably what kills widebands more than crappy controllers. But the NTK stuff with methanol, you always want to, you can run NTK with gas too, but they're expensive sensors. But whenever you're running methanol, there's really no other way with those. You want to run an NTK sensor, period.
And why is that?
Because they'll do extreme. So they'll go down to on a methanol 2.66 or like point.
So it's because of the air fuel ratio.
Yeah, 0.5 lambda. I like tuning on lambda because lambda 1's always lambda 1. So lambda tuning, like you'll have a lambda on, say, gas is 14.7, or you'll get these ethanol blends will be 4.5. You'll get straight E85s 9.85. You'll get methanol 6.45. Well, when I'm tuning a 1.0 on a methanol, I know that indicates 6.45. So like say on my CUDA, it idles and runs on normal pump gas. As soon as I tip in, I'm always on lambda. When I tip into it, it goes full alcohol, but I'm always on a lambda value. So I'm just telling it a lambda value. But then when I let off, all it knows is it just changes. It knows the fuel density is changing, the stoic number is changing, which is chemically correct burn. So that's where you'll get fuel blending in these, which that's a whole nother topic in itself. But when you get into wide bands, tuning lambda when you're doing a dual fuel setup is a lot easier because your numbers make a lot more sense with that. So there's
other hardware stuff. Digital dashes. Do you have a favorite one? Which one do you like?
I'm running. I actually bought a Digitune for my my CUDA, and it's not bad. It's like a Raspberry Pi based. They're nice for the bang for the buck, But then I've heard that Tinker Electronics is making some decent stuff. But then you get those, what are they? Up here, I always see them. I always wanted one of them, but they're friggin' expensive. There's those, they're like an MXL. Um, oh, shoot. AIM. That's what they are. AIM dashes. Really nice. The Holly dashes, though, the nice thing is even with a standalone dash, before you go to fuel injection, you can run those things as a standalone. Um, it all depends. I've repurposed guys' old raceback dashes for fuel injection. Through they actually make a lot of the stuff now that you can actually run those on. So, it all depends what you like. Even the tablets, like Rich runs a tablet on his, which is nice. You can real time. Some of these ones have, which is same as the Raspberry Pi dashes. They have the interactive where you can switch tune on the fly if you want. Where
and
It's
you
good
can
at
get
it's good at distracting Matt when you're cruising for a long time. You just give him the whole dash, and he can
well, you
play and
get on,
tune and
you can get on Teen Viewer on there, right?
yes,
yeah.
right. That's
You have to
why
keep
that's
an
why
eye
it
on
runs so rough. Or smooth, I mean smooth. Sorry.
Oh, ouch. um, okay.
Yeah,
Um,
the nice thing too is like I always tell people when you're cruising like on these dragon drives, let your buddy drive the car and you'll steady state and start piling timing into these areas and you'll feel like you'll richen it up, start it a little rich, start piling timing in and you'll feel it and you'll watch the TPS. You'll actually watch the TPS go away. You'll see him pull out and the thing will cruise. Like I know Pat Miker's car, that's a stick car with a clutch, like
Lenko, yeah.
but his driving down the road, I just sat in there um, and start piling timing into it. And he's all of a sudden, did you do something? I'm like, yep. Well, he had to lift his foot off because we started putting timing in and because you only have a little bit of air, but lighting it off at the right time, getting all you can out of it. And that efficiency, you don't carbon up your combustion chambers. You keep the oil really clean. Like I tune in a lot of methanol cars and they always say, how come my oil's not milky? Well, there's nothing wrong with idling a methanol car on stoic like at Lambda 1 and it heats up better. You don't have to sit there and rev the daylights out of it to get temperature in it. So, running these ones too rich through, but then cruising, running them just a smidge rich and piling timing into it like your car. It's the other thing is when you tip in, you want to make sure that you pull all that timing out too. Like it's when you're light or constant load, you'll have your friend just start putting timing in those areas and then blending it out higher and then blending it out lower through. And
Okay, so I have another question then about cruising down the road. So I have probably like lots of guys, I have full exhaust, but I have pretty large downpipes. So at idle and low RPM, and it could be that I have a leak somewhere, but my AFRs are not always the same. So should I do tuning an average of the two? Should I tune to the leanest one, the richest one, pick a bank? Like what do you recommend?
That's the first thing I saw in yours is you were doing an average. And the problem is the one always said it was leaner than the other. Well, it's because you had a bit of an exhaust leak and the exhaust leaks will kill you every day of the week because when you're only sucking, like it's sucking so hard, it's only pulling so much air. Well, when you get that tiny little leak and it mixes in, it thinks it's really lean. And that's where you get these things.
I think he just said Ford suck.
Yes.
I did not hear that.
So on his, we always tune to the, on yours, we turned it to the richest because I don't know what it is. You might have a tiny pinhole or a leak on one of your
Pontiac.
on one of your
Travis,
turbos.
Mute Rich.
So you might have a leak, exhaust leak, and it's pulling unmetered air, like what didn't go through the engine in, and it's compensating for it. So that's the problem with the thing is.
So you should have it set to the leanest bank or the richest bank?
Richest sometimes, but it depends the car because an average on like if you aren't sure the exhaust is really good, an average is good sometimes, but sometimes the leanest is good too, like with a racing because you don't necessarily know, right? Because your sum of that because you're looking at the sum of four cylinders, right?
Well, and it's under load, it's fine. They even up then.
Yeah.
It's just light
Because you
load
have
cruise.
so much more air through that tiny
Right.
little bit doesn't make a difference. Now, a lot
Right.
of these aftermarket controllers, a Holly won't bank to bank individually control. It's average, leanest, richest, left or right. You get these other ones you can do like riches, you can do 8, you could close loop control all cylinders if you wanted to. A lot of these will do bank to bank, will control them different, but if you have an exhaust leak, it really doesn't matter in that aspect. So like on your car, when you have that engine in and out, 10 more times you can inspect it, and
Oh, it's something in my eye.
you should what you should do actually is pressure up your exhaust and put some pressure in there and start spraying some dish
I have done all of this, and it's
Yes.
extremely difficult to fix everything in the collector where it leaks a little. So
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time this winter doing
those
that. It's better, but
Remflex gaskets, I have to say, like those thick ones, and other companies are making them now, they're like that thick and then they crush down.
no, this is where the collector comes together inside the header. That's where the
Well,
leak is.
did you put high temp like ultra copper in there when they slide in, or is it where they welded it?
It's where they welded it.
They
They-
Well, maybe you need to get in there from the backside, or who knows. But
yeah, I've tried all that. Yeah, I did all that.
I maybe need some JB Weld or your friend JB to help you. I don't know.
Maybe.
okay.
So-
I'll
so really
move us
do-
on.
So should I adjust it to the rich side, the rich
the rich
bank,
one,
or
because
the
the one's
bean
always
bank?
going to show lean. Cruising now, when you're full throttle, it might not be a bad thing to do the average of it, right? In that aspect, and because I know you switch between your race gas tune and your street tune that
Yep,
way too. So
So for the street, I should tune it to the richest bank.
yep, you should.
Okay.
And then on the other one,
Okay.
you can just average the two.
Perfect.
But when you're in one downpipe, you don't really know. Now there's pre-O2. That's where we get into these ADV sensors. They're made. That's what like the OEM stuff is running now. So when you apply pressure to a O2 sensor, it will magnify what it's reading. So if it's rich, it'll make it read richer or leaner as soon as you put pressure. So if you put it pre-turbo, you got to have an actual back pressure sensor on there that knows what the pressure is to modify the actual reading what's there. Now these ADV sensors will somewhat do them internal with it. When you're doing with these other ones, you have to run it if you're going to run a pre-turbo.
But which OEM would be running those?
Like Cadillacs, or you get these turbos, like a lot of these new turbo cars that are like the turbo 4 cylinders that they have, like an ATS or stuff like that. A lot of these turbo
My Volkswagen Golf, like that one.
yeah, I would probably have it, but it depends if they're running pre-turbo, post-turbo. Some run pre, some run post. But the nice thing is they pressure compensate. The ADV ones also. Talking to the owner Mtron, he said they'll go down to a pretty low lambda, lower than the 4.2s and the 4.9s, which is almost in NTK territory. But trying to get an aftermarket controller for them is getting like they'll get out to the market, but they're always a bit behind. Yeah.
So let's move on to remote tuning.
Mm-hmm.
What like you and I chatted a bit about that, or we talked about it earlier. But if somebody was to call you up, what would they require on their laptop to allow you to get in there? Because I know you can literally
Team
take
Viewer, of
control
course.
over-
Team viewer. I was just gonna
No,
say.
not Team Viewer. Different podcast, man.
Sorry, that's tomorrow night. So with remote tuning, like I will remote tune. I just have to know. It depends what I'm remote tuning. If it's something OEM and I know the guy's pretty good and he really watches, like he's thorough, I don't mind it. But then I get this big horsepower stuff. Sometimes when you listen and observe in person, like you can look at a data log, it looks great, and you'll be tuning around a miss, or you'll be tuning around a mechanical problem that you can't hear, and you'll put this great tune on it, but then you'll be just tuning. It's like a dartboard, right? You never know where the bullseye is. You think the bullseye's here, but it's actually there. You're trying to find your ass with both hands in the dark sometimes. But if the car is put together right and done, usually, remote control software, make sure your laptop is actually powered up, charged, and you've had it connected to the internet for at least an hour, because it's probably going to do a million updates. And in the middle, it's going to want to restart or do stuff. Always fire your laptop up that day, let it charge and run, like hook it to the internet, make sure it restarts. And then, just like when you're running a podcast, make sure that you've ran it first, that it has it. Open up the software, because sometimes these softwares auto update. Or if you're on a, say, new version of Holly, I'll have somebody call me on a V3 or V4, and I'll be like, well, why aren't you on the latest, say, V6s with it? Because they do fix a lot of little bugs. That's the thing, is if there's something.
But at a high level,
Mhm.
if you're going to tune somebody's car at the track, I say tune, but really you're hoping that they know enough to download a data log. They could send it to you ahead of time,
Yeah.
but then you can actually log on to their program and make adjustments to their tune, to their timing table, to whatever you wanted. Typically, you're not going to be tuning it when it's driving down the track. You're going to look at a log that they sent you, or you can look at it when you connect to their computer. What did you say? One desk? Any desk?
Any desk is a good one. Usually what I'll do too with them is I'll want to look at logs, look at the tune. Like if I do remote tune a lot of vehicles, if I'm doing a 2,000 horse, 3,000 horse, 4,000 horse, or if I'm doing something that, the guy's not as comfortable, I'll go there and tune it. I go travel a lot to tune. And when it's something serious, I don't like to remote tune it, but sometimes, I can look at a tune. I'd like to go through the tune, get it find their leaks, find all their little problems, make sure that their valves aren't too tight, get a heat cycle through it, retorque the heads. That's one thing that some engines really do need retorques, or after you run it a while. I know even yours, Rich, you go beat on it and the heads would move a smidge. Before we start remote tuning it, it'd be nice to have we'll go through, we'll get it so it'll run. It's running, right on the money, so it's not too rich. And then get a heat cycle out of it, check everything, and then we can put it in and run it at the track. I like to get the VE table as close as I can. You can usually guess a VE table, not guess, but math it out within a few percent, 5%, and then you have your wideband to save you a little bit, but I'll always err to the rich side on it and then pull your fuel out. So with that, you can do a tune, make sure that the timing is right. It's not a flat number. I see, like I said, so much, you'll just see guys, instead of, having the timing properly, I'll have to go through and redo the timing tables. So really, to remote tune it, I don't mind it. It's just make sure that the car runs. All your plug wires are right. You have new plugs in it.
Yeah, Matt, you're breaking up for me too.
Am I? Okay. Yeah, I will. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You might want to be more specific.
Yeah. So with remote tuning cars, when I'll go in a remote tune, I'll get something like AnyDesk to remote into their laptop. Just make sure that you have it updated. If you let all your millions Windows updates that you neglected to run, that all of a sudden running while I'm trying to tune the thing, that are slowing it down. Well, you're tethered to your phone. The other thing is know how to tether your phone to your laptop, because a lot of the times, we can go. The nice thing is I can remote in and we can go do some of that highway tuning, and it's sometimes nice to see steady state and you can watch the thing get better, and I will do that sometimes, but I usually like to go over the tune before we even start, get a good tune in there, and then go to the track with the bass, make sure that you know how to download the software and go through. The big thing is I try when I'm teaching somebody is get their laptops. We'll get a good base tune in it, and then something that you can modify yourself. Because I try not to be married to people. I like to empower them so they know what they're actually doing, what they're looking at, and they can make those little adjustments. And like on you, Rich, I don't know last time you adjusted your fuel, but it's the launch RPM, timing. You'll be playing with your timing retard after launch, your launch RPM, your boost targets.
Yeah,
It's
it's more about
fuel is
the track than it is
yeah, fuel's
the
fuel. It's
fueling. Yeah,
pretty simple to tune fuel. Timing is another thing, but it's just making sure that we have a good base, but then the person, they know how to actually pull the log out. Now I'll go in, remote in, and pull the log out and make sure that it's fine, and teach a person how to do that. But what I'll usually do sometimes is have them just email it to me through, and if we can't log in, because sometimes, like if you're down at what was that track, South Georgia Motorsports Park, the internet's just great there, so I'll have them email me a tune through at the track and to go through it. But a lot of the stuff is, I like to teach people how to do it themselves. So
So, so I'm curious. Do you have any wild remote tuning successes or failure stories?
well, we've had lots of really good failures. I don't know what would be. There's the funny thing is you'll get these guys will have aha moments, right? They'll be like, "Oh, there's a problem," and I'm like, "Well, there's a problem." They're like, "No, there isn't," and then I'll say, "Well, just go start looking," and then they'll phone me back and be like, "Oh yeah, this was wrong, that was wrong." They'll find the actual problem, but the problem is try not to be too stubborn when it comes to this stuff, to think you did everything
Hmm.
right, because everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes. Just double checking the simple things is always the first thing you try, is go through the basic stuff. Like when I tell people, when they bring me a car to the dyno, make sure the thing runs good. If I know I'm going to have to sit there for a bunch of hours and get the thing running, I want to know beforehand, is this going to be a tuner, or am I actually kind of doing this car for you? Am I
You have
rewiring
to
it?
mentally prepare for that. Is that what you're
And
saying?
it costs you a lot more money. The more that you can do yourself and have ready, the car running and driving and everything working, all those leaks solved, especially
Yeah.
dyno or remote tuning, being as prepared as you can for your tuner is the best thing. And then when they put the tune in, drive it around, and sometimes I'll look at the learn, but I'll want a person to say, we'll put a tune in, okay, run it to the track, look and see how much was the wideband correcting, how far off are we. If it's really far off, we might have a different problem. You might have a leak, you might have, one of your O2 sensors is seeing a little bit unmetered air. So it,
it's almost a good place for a checklist. Actually, like if
yeah,
someone's going to come to your dyno, I know that you don't do this, but it's probably not a bad one to go. You need to bring the fuel that you want to run the street and race with. You want to bring spark plugs. You want to bring the tools to change spark plugs.
bring
A
your
laptop.
tools to the dyno. That's one thing I say, bring your toolkit and all your tools. I on purpose try not to have all the tools of the dyno, because I don't want people there to work on their car. Like, yes, we're tuning it, we'll work on it, there's impromptu repairs, but I'm not a mechanic shop. I tune for fun. I pick and choose who I tune for. That's why I don't have a checklist with it, because I like to do interesting things, higher horsepower stuff, tune for Bill. But there are good checklists. Like you look on some of these forums, or a lot of it's just common sense. Don't bring something that doesn't run
Well,
unless
I think it's common sense if you've been to a dyno, but if you haven't been to a dyno, I'm
just
sure
think
you get
as if
people
you're
to show
going to
up
the
there that are.
racetrack, think you're going to go race for a whole weekend and you're far away from home. So bring everything that you're going to need. If you were going to go on drag week, bring your drag week trailer with all your stuff in it. Bring all your, like I said, spare plugs. Always the one thing is spare spark plugs, exactly the ones that you run, and verify with your tuner. Don't put platinum plugs in a turbo car. They run too hot. You can run like an iridium, but don't run a platinum. Because they run too hot, you'll detonate with them. There's sometimes a quick text to your tuner, or just sometimes I like little asks. I would rather them just ask me, then assume, or I'll just spend a little bit of time on the phone with them before they come to me to just go through their combination, or send some pictures, take some pictures, because I'll spot, hey, why do you have a panty vac going into your exhaust before your O2 sensor?
Who would do that?
Yeah, like why, right?
Hey, so speaking of spark plugs, don't you have a T-shirt on for somebody who makes a really nice
Oh, a
spark plug?
spark plug holder, my WAF Racing
Yes,
T-shirt. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, they are actually
super.
are the best because he makes carb tools, like everything you need. But the spark plug stuff is just great because you can pre-gap them, chuck them in your actual bin that you're going to race, and you don't have to sit there gapping. You can take your old ones out, and when you're in a rush, and look at them later, or if you're swapping back and forth, like
Yeah,
he's got such nice stuff, and for the price, like, yeah, go buy your 3D printer, do it yourself, but he's got it so refined that it's not worth it to go and try and do it yourself, because he's an engineer for a living and he really enjoys it. So he's really came up with some nice products that way, which, I know with Rich, he'll probably be making him more stick shift, weights for his slipper clutch, a holder, or separate things like how they have for jets. They'll be doing that stuff.
The latest I called him with was if he could build plugs for transmissions. So when you pull a drive shaft off, you can plug them. Like
mm,
that would be a good 3D one because pretty much everyone who's got to pull their tranny, you're going to pull your drive shaft off and leak all over the place. But different plugs. So I think he's working on that one too. It's another good thing about Chris Wozniak and WAF Racing is that they will, shoot him a message. You'd be surprised at what he can build you. So
Yeah,
now that we're done with the WAF Racing commercial,
yeah, he will. He will.
sponsored by.
Yeah, you have anything like little projects, he will do it. Like he will, like you want him to build you a plug, he will. He's really good that way with you.
Nice. So let's talk. There's some questions on here about methanol tuning and cooling. So
So
for a drag car, do you think it's okay to run a car on methanol with no coolant? I would say yes, but I don't really know.
so when you're running no coolant, you have to understand if it's solid or not. If it's solid, you have a lot more area for
Thermal heat sink.
well, thermal heat sink, but more area to josh your tune. If you're not exact on it, it's not going to melt as soon as we have a water jacketed. It's thin. The aluminum, when you get that too hot, like you don't want to run it. You want to run it a smidge richer per se, and you want to watch your timing and creep up to it, or else you're going to be like a cutting torch on a hollow water jacketed head. Where I almost tell
Mm,
somebody, just put water in the heads too. It doesn't hurt because it will help you. And with something like methanol's nice because as long as you can fire it off, it doesn't hurt the power too much because it does contain oxygen too. So methanol, as long as you can light it, run it rich, and then pile the timing into it, it is so forgiving that, versus a gas tune, like if Rich switches over to alcohol, you could pile it, it would pick up some power. Now you can intercool methanol too, but you don't want to intercool it too much because you'll end up hitting a dew point, and you can pull the moisture out of the air even more. So that's the funny thing with it. But methanol is great to tune with. And the other thing with methanol and any fuels is injector end angle, and that's something too. Is when you're lugging a car down, and people don't think about injector end angle, when's that starting to spray? You want that thing to spray and make a phase change from a liquid to a gas. And you'll get these guys and it's OEM cars, you'll get rid of the cats. And why do they stink? Well, I put a bigger cam in, you're smelling that unburnt fuel. If you move back the injector end angle to the right time, it'll get rid of that stink.
mm.
That's where.
explain what injector end angle actually is.
So injector end angle, a lot of it, they base it off the end of injection. So we get that little, spray when it puts fuel into your intake port. You'll have it say 360 degrees before top dead center, or on that. What it is as soon as that intake valve closes, you'll have your compression stroke, then you have your exhaust stroke, and then what you'll want to do is you'll want to start spraying that fuel before the intake valve opens, because there's injector duty cycle. The lower injector duty cycle, the more time you have to spray. You'll get direct injected vehicles only have a small amount of time to actually spray the fuel in. On a port injected vehicle, you have all the time in the world. You can spray it all the time if you want, but you want to make sure you spray it soon enough that when it hits that valve, now droplet size matters, but it doesn't. That's where a GM, or you'll get that intake valve temperature does make a difference because it'll hit that and gas off. You just want to make sure that you spray it soon enough that it turns from a liquid to a gas. And then that way, and also when you're racing, different fuels have different read vapor pressure. Yeah. So your injector angle might change depending on what fuel you're tuning with. So when it comes to that, you just won't have it. You can have it too late, but you can start going. What you'll do is, say on a steady state, if I was tuning something on a dyno, let's just say at a low RPM, you can get it too late where you'll see it'll need to add more fuel because it'll just be almost liquid going out. It'll be burning in the exhaust where you'll start turning it back. It'll get smoother. It'll lean itself out, and then you can go too far, and I'd rather be too far than too late. But the problem is you go too soon, it'll almost have reversion and another cylinder can steal it. And it'll actually have reversion into the intake. Or if you have some overlap or too much overlap, low RPM, if you have the injector end angle too early, it'll kind of push it back out. So that's the other thing is your overlap and cam timing or cam timing events influence it also.
So at a high level, the number 360 degrees or 320 degrees is when the end of the injector stops spraying
when
in relation to the crankshaft.
Yeah, when it's done. Now, every computer, they'll say that's mid, start, mid, end. You have to watch how they specify it. Usually it's end of angle. So say my OEM car, you pull the cats out or you put a bigger cam and you want to turn that back because the actual valve is going to be opening sooner. So if it opens 20 degrees sooner, I might want to go at least 20 degrees back more to start spraying. So then that way it's not spraying necessarily. You want it pretty much done just as the valve's kind of opening, just as it's starting to suck. You want it done. Now, depending your valve temperature, your fuel, etc., that can change. There's a lot of things that influence it. But
that's on a Dodge that you just said sucks?
Yes. But okay. See, your car, we played with injector end angle too, actually, as it smoothed it out. It was a little bit late. Low RPMs. So I turned it back a little bit and just got it more in the area and then able to pile timing in. But the problem is you have your injector end angle too late at a low RPM. You're just throwing fuel out the exhaust. So you got to make that.
So if you run batch, it's irrelevant, right?
It's kind of irrelevant.
It's like having a carburetor.
Yeah, and a carburetor though they atomize through and like they start atomizing from the beginning. On a batch setup, some engines, like I said, you methanol batch it. Who cares? Like you just throw it in. It's like a carburetor. You just want to run
there's so much fuel in the manifold that it doesn't matter.
Well, you got to think there's 4 parts, say 4 parts of air to 1 part of fuel, or 4 parts air to 1 part of fuel versus 12 parts of air to 1 part of fuel. Like there's a lot more area there that if you're a little off, it doesn't matter because you're dealing with so much. You're dealing with air fuel ratio difference is there's that much more. So
Matt, on a methanol car, what would you say the most overlooked safety or tuning considerations are that people have that they just don't look at or overlook?
There's a few things. I think is making sure that you're always racing, doing your burnout and starting out at your same temperature. This is any vehicle. If you're going to be at 140 or do your burnout at a certain temperature, certain things, when you're going to stage, always try and do it at the same because it is going to, a lot of these don't have some of the corrections on the aftermarket computers for it. So if you can do everything the same every time, your tune's going to stay a lot more consistent on just at a lower level for most people is try and do everything the same that way. Now, when it comes to methanol, they don't run it rich enough when you're under power. Like the other thing is gapping rings. You want to dwell those coils. Dwell time on coils is the amount of time it takes to charge. So what it does is it holds, it's like taking a jumper cable to a battery and holding it on the battery for 3 milliseconds, or let's just up it 3 seconds versus 5 seconds. Well, it's going to charge more when I hold it on the battery for 5 seconds. When I let go, it sparks, and that's your charge time. So people won't dwell, spark plugs won't dwell the coils long enough to get the hot spark. You want to be able to light that mixture. And this is also on gas, anyone. You want to have as much spark as you can. And, having a good plug wire, a really good ignition, a good coil, and having that charge time, getting it, you don't have to run a 10 thou gap or 15 thou gap to drive on a drag and drive car. I'd rather run just a tiny bit wider gap that you don't have to change all the time and dwell the crap out of it, because the more you dwell it, the more chance you have to light it, especially when you're lighting it sooner than later. You're actually going to get more of a complete burn, because you'll have guys that won't have enough dwell, and their timing, they'll end up actually with, it's taking this much timing. Well, it's because it's not really a complete burn. Actually, you're over timed. And I've seen guys, you'll up your dwell, they'll all of a sudden be over timed because it's now burning and it's actually starting the fire sooner. So with a methanol cars, enough dwell, you want as strong a coil as you have, and then, a good plug that gap it proper. Some, it depends, 15 thou, you might be, some may be 20, 25. It depends your boost and the combination, but dwell your coil as much as you can when you're up in RPM, as i.e. charge the coil so it sparks as hot as you can. So you're not going to have a miss, because a miss at a high RPM is not a good thing.
Yeah. So what about monitoring engine health over time on a meth car for this question, but I guess in general? I mean, I know on my own data logs, I have an engine health screen that I can glance at that just, fuel pressure, oil pressure, that kind of stuff, so I can identify a problem real quickly.
Well, it's like trending, right? It's no different than an airplane. Like, I write how much oil I put in, when, how many hours, what I was doing. If you're racing versus cruising, it depends the load and how much fuel you're burning. Like if you're racing and hey, I use a quart every so often, actually recording that, or even a mental note of how much oil the thing uses, what's it usually run at for temperature? All of a sudden it's running cooler or hotter. Well, maybe one of the cylinders isn't firing as efficiently driving down the road, and I burnt a plug wire and it's running cooler. Just paying attention to trends is huge.
Okay.
It's huge on everything.
How much is in the
catch can,
the overflow?
Yeah.
Catch can. Yeah.
Or even
exhaust
even on your car, Rich, right? Like looking at EGTs, is it running colder, hotter? And that by just valve lash can change that when you have an EGT per se. Now EGTs, it's great to have an EGT, but you got to remember an EGT is more influenced off of timing than it is fuel. But if every cylinder is timed properly, like that because every cylinder is like an engine in itself. Everyone's different. As much as they look the same, they all have a different flow. So what you're going to look at in those is sometimes people start doing it. Yeah, you can add fuel to cool it down, but sometimes it's, hey, that one, it's at the back of the engine, it's running hotter, so you skew some timing out, because it's going to have a more efficient burn than the front of the engine. And that's where you'll take timing out of your back cylinders, because they are going to run hotter, and it'll save you if you are running on the edge with those things. So, having EGTs, the more data, the better. OEM sensors are great. These ride height sensors, I introduced Rich to them. You start going on Rock Auto or these ones and looking at OEM stuff. I run lots of aftermarket stuff, but on drag and drive stuff, the OEM has really good resolution on these things. People look at my car sometimes and, what, you're running that on, a Pro Mod type car? Well, yeah, because it has more resolution and I don't have to worry about if I hit a puddle with it. So the data, we could do a whole episode on sensors and data acquisition in a car. The more data, the better, no matter what. That you can offer your tuner in general is better. just the more things that you can monitor, exhaust back pressure, charge temperature, even pre-post intercooler, seeing, how efficient stuff is. Like, I know you're a stickler for data, Bill, when it comes to these things. The more data you have, sometimes you can predict more. But then the one thing that ticks me off sometimes is people, they dwell on things that don't matter, where like I'm going to spend a bunch of time to make this one little thing better. Well, why don't you spend that time fixing your 60 foot? Who cares about that 6 horsepower you might gain, or these stupid little things that are so insignificant, where there's bigger fish to fry when it comes to certain things.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we could dive into that too, but maybe for another time.
Yeah, it's like clutch stuff. Like you can always have a gluttony of horsepower when it comes to certain things, or like, hey, I need to go make 100 more horse. Well, if you just improved your 60 foot,
you don't need to.
And that's where sometimes I'm bad for. I just like horsepower, but it's those starting to work, chip away. You look at Rich's car; he's chipped away at the same combination for a long time and made it better. I've got customers that we started running 9.0s, now they're running 7s, same combination. It's just increasing, getting the incrementals. The sooner you can get the horsepower in, the better. The more average horsepower you can put down to the track during the run, the faster you're going to go. The math, no matter how you do it, the sooner you can get to your target boost, like doing these boost ramps, the sooner you can get to your actual boost that you're going to run, the better. The more horsepower you can make sooner and put to the ground, no matter what, you're going to go faster. So who cares if you make 100 horse more? If you could just get the boost in a second quicker, you'll probably go faster than making that extra bit up top that you can only apply for a certain amount of time.
So, and I was going to move on to the next questions. Did you have something first?
No, I was going to do the same thing.
Okay, so this is in 2 sentences or less. You have to answer all of these. So we're going to go back and forth between Bill and I. So this is going to be a challenge for you, Matt. You're going to have to.
It's hard to not elaborate because there's certain things,
I know, but you're going to have to try because
like you get like someone like Ben Strader. I love sitting talking to him for hours because we'll talk about, just
like he's already going off the rails.
We'll talk about theories or certain things because he's a really intelligent guy that I respect.
Who are your biggest influences in tuning?
The biggest influences, a guy that I actually met, Brian Macy. He's been doing it forever, and got to know him, friends with him. Ask questions, vice versa. And I know he was tuning some. I don't know if it was Dodge or Ford stuff. I did, but he wasn't doing the OEM stuff as much. So I helped him out with OEM stuff. Well, then I got into a boat, and he tunes a lot of boats. He gave me friggin' 20 years of knowledge in about 15 minutes that, to struggle away. The nice thing is there's a lot of mutual respect amongst tuners.
Who does he work for now, Matt?
I think he's EFI store. I think he's in Lake Havasu. He's a really good one. You look at a guy like Mike.
Probably knows Ben Strader.
Yeah, he's nearby. He's a really good tuner. And Ben is he's a great tuner. He understands OEM, but he also, he works in a machine shop.
Okay.
Matt, 2 sentences.
Question number 2.
Next question. What do you think the next evolution of tuning will be in the next 5 to 10 years? 2 sentences.
Evolution of tuning.
That's 1 sentence.
Geez, that's
faster ECUs.
You only need so fast of an ECU to do like an engine. They are really simple, so you only need so much processing power to do a task. But these multi-core processors are great because it's more exacting. They're easy to predict. The faster processor you have, the more precise timing you can have. So I'd say in the next years, it's just probably like direct injection, but then you get, I don't know, there's embracing more OEM. Like that's the thing. The aftermarket is embracing OEM fueling strategies. So I look forward to them copying the OEM more.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think you do that very well, Matt. That when you get in my car, you take stuff you've learned from the OEM and you put it into mine. So, okay, next question. I'm trying to decide, Bill, if we should skip the next one or if we should go to the. We're going to give you an opportunity to answer this one, Matt, but it's going to be challenging for you to keep it short. Is there a myth or trend in tuning world that you wish would just go away?
Myth or trend? Well, you look at the.
Did you write this one, Bill?
You look at the stock bottom end LS shit, and you look at some of these tunes. They're just hot garbage. Like some of these pre-canned tunes, I wish would kind of go away because I get the stuff come to me, and the guy takes the car away after I'm done, and it looks nothing like it. So I would maybe some of these pre-canned or just some of these tunes that are on the internet. Though I like that one Holly one where it's got the cow eating the grass. Did you see that one on the fuel table? That was a good one, I have to say. Actually. But
Okay.
it's just some of the canned tunes that aren't good. It would go away.
Okay, next question. What advice would you give to a driver trying to get better at communicating what the car is doing?
Get better, understand certain things, understand what an air fuel ratio is, what timing is. Just get more of an in-depth understanding what the engine's actually doing when you're explaining to somebody, hey, it feels like a miss, or it feels like, or it even sounds. There's not a stupid question. There's always stupid answers. So I get people ask me certain things, but the more you can describe, say even sometimes noises, but it's what's it doing? Here's that. I don't mind that sometimes. I don't mind explaining things because people always want to learn about their car. But the more you can learn about, what does a miss feel like, the more you can understand what the car actually does, how the engine's running, what does it sound like on 8 cylinders, what should I be expecting, boosted. You look at similar cars, similar combinations, make sure that yours is in the ballpark, or it's, your car is not special. At the end of the day, every car, every internal combustion engine is the same. Yours isn't going to be something that's all of a sudden like a perpetual motion machine. So if something doesn't make sense, there's a problem. There's being to know that 1 + 1 = 2. If it's, if something doesn't add up, it's probably a problem. It's not just yours, or you have numbers really wrong.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. If you were to build a competitive stick shift drag car from scratch, what would you start with and why?
Well, a Gen 3 Hemi.
And the why is because you love Dodges. Okay. Well, that was an easy answer on that one.
Well, he's trying to dodge the real question.
I don't know. Like I've toyed with putting a stick in my Dart, but it's a big tire car, so it's not necessarily fair because a lot of these are smaller tire. Like to go out and run a big tire car, it's kind of not in the spirit of it. So I kind of kibosh that idea. I'll probably do my CUDA. I've got to put a TKX in that and have that Hellcat blower now, do a Gen 3 Hemi. But if I was going to compete, I'd probably do like a small car, like even my Scamp, put a Hemi and a stick in that and convert it to rear wheel drive as light as I can go. And the Gen 3 Hemis, like their bang for the buck is hard to beat. They're almost like they're better than an LS because you get the factory heads outflow aftermarket LS heads every day of the week. And that's what people don't realize. So bang for the buck. If I was going to build a stick car, probably be just figure out what's light and Gen 3 Hemi and talk to
light and Gen 3 Hemi.
Okay, next question, and good job. Are there common build decisions that you see that make tuning way harder than it needs to be?
Injectors. People buy just off the shelf or crap injectors. Talk to your tuner before you buy injectors or do fuel system stuff. Even ECU. everybody buys certain things and I'll work with it. But if we have a chance to, when we're starting out and you have a specific goal, certain computers are better for specific goals, depending what you're doing. If it's land speed racing, stick racing, straight up drag racing, talk to your tuner as much as you can. And, even have your tuner sometimes with your engine builder and cam selection. I like to have input on camshaft selection, sometimes compression. I used to work in a machine shop and I still build a lot of my own engines and do my own machining. The sooner you get your tuner involved, sometimes they don't care what it is, but good injectors are always a thing because data, garbage in, garbage out. You bring them a set of shitty old injectors that are dirty, that don't have it, or there's certain parts. Oh, I bought this. Well, no, you should have bought that. Or, the sooner you can get your tuner involved with it, depending on what level of experience they have, the better, because it'll save you money, or they'll know people that have certain parts so you can save money. So the sooner you get involved with whoever's tuning and kind of helping you with the car, the better. Don't just go and purchase things. Get a little bit of insight if you can. Sometimes they don't care, but a lot of the times, fuel system is big. I don't like tuning with unknown injectors because those are one thing that can really bite you. You have wrong data. And I always tell people this: unhook your battery, kick an alternator belt. If your injector dead time's wrong and all of a sudden you're missing a half millisecond of fuel when you're on a gas engine, that could be a lot. And if your O2 sensor, it might not catch it. That split second of lean could be the difference. On a methanol car, not as much, but data is it helps it be more consistent across the board.
That's a good answer for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go to the second bullet of the next question because I think we touched on the first part.
Yep.
How much of your tune is set it and forget it, and what should you be changing, or what should you be tracking changing at each track?
See, it depends the computer. If you have a Holly, you're going to watch, like if you're going from sea level down, or going up in altitude, you're going to want to watch and see your trending of your fueling, because your learn table will catch some of it, but sometimes you might want to add percentages of fuel depending on how you have it set up, or you might have different tunes for different tracks for different altitudes. I find a lot of people will do that with ones that don't do it. Certain, it's going to be boost. There's a lot of the stuff set it and forget it should almost be a fuel table. Your fuel table shouldn't really change. Your timing is pretty much, once you've arrived on a number, you don't need to change it, because if you have intake air numbers, you can have that where when it gets hot, it'll peel it away. When it gets cold, it might add a smidge. The more, and that's where it gets into OEM, but some engines act a little differently. So you're going to play with it a little bit. And on some, it doesn't matter, but it depends your horsepower level and how serious you get with it. If you have the time and you can really follow that trend, it's really, shouldn't have to touch your fuel, shouldn't have to touch your timing, and really you shouldn't have to touch your fuel table much. It's going to be your boost, your launch RPM. Sometimes it's your timing retard after, and when you make a clutch change, you're adding weight to it. Do you want to run at the clutch? Do you want to have more boost? What's RPM going to influence? If I add another 200 RPM, all of a sudden my weight on my slipper clutch, or when you're taking a run at it with your bank shift billy and you're running at that clutch, you all of a sudden have a lot more weight spinning around that wants to grip that a lot tighter. It's going to hit that clutch a lot harder than at low RPM where it's going to be able to take a run at it and let it slip. So that's more is basing your tune around what your clutch is doing and the slip of it. Because I know, like, I have a bank shift billy for my my green car, and even with testing in that is, your slip is going to change depending on your RPM value, because just because you have that certain slip time, you add more RPM, it might on yours slip a little harder, but sometimes changing the RPM might be better when you've arrived on a good number that the clutch slips really good. It kind of, because everyone's going to grab a little bit differently.
Yeah.
You arrive on a number that's good on your bank shift billy that, releases and lets it slip good. You don't maybe want to change the time. You might just want to change your RPM a little bit. So it'll take, a little more RPM, might add a little slip to it, might take it away. That might be your better option than changing your settings or time on it.
Yeah. All right, Rich, should we dive into the TKO round?
Yeah, it's at we're just about at 2 hours here, so
Yeah,
some of us have to work at some point.
it's a school night. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
It is a school night. Okay, I think you answered question one with the first car you owned and modified. That was your Dart, and
Yep.
and you still have that today with the dingle balls in the back.
Yeah. It's getting a Gen
So
3.
the second, of course it is. Second question: what, in your opinion, has been the biggest technology change to move our sport forward?
2 sentences.
Oh, the technology change. Probably turbochargers, aftermarket turbochargers, fuel injection too, but turbochargers probably the most, because you look at, like when I started out, I had an old TV series turbo kind of mashed together. Now they can custom tailor to your thing, and you even look at power adders, Whipples, all these things. They've increased efficiencies. I would say how far the power adders have came, because engines are engines. You know, you increase it, you get a little better. But I'd say turbos and forced induction, how they made it better.
Nice. Okay, Matt, third gear. If you could spend one day with someone, anyone, who would it be and what would you do?
Other than me,
Oh, I don't know. It depends on the context, but car related, maybe Ben Strader.
No, it doesn't have to be car
Maybe,
related.
maybe Ben Strader on the car related one, but I'd maybe like to spend another day with my mom, because she passed quite away, 10 years ago. But there's lots of industry guys, there's lots of really good tuners that you can learn from. I probably have a short list of tuners that I'd like to spend a day with and just pick each other's brain, because we all have different ways of sometimes approaching the same subject, and we can always pick up a lot from each other.
Nice.
awesome. Okay, we'll bang her into fourth gear. Oh God, this one's going to be bad. What influences you to build your cars? Mopar.
Matt.
What influences me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I get sick of cars sometimes, though. Like I really do sometimes, but then I do and I don't. That's where I don't mind tuning, because wrenching on, like I've been getting wrenching on my cars more, but I get sick of it. So it's, but though just got to get the passion. You got to take breaks. But, I've always liked cars, and then just making my friends' cars faster. That's one of the things that I really like to see people succeed. Or even I make a lot of friends with tuning. It's just seeing them do the best they can, get the most out of it, instead of spending every last, like you get so many people that waste money, or they get in with the wrong tuner and they just throw money at it. It's such a shame sometimes that people take advantage of people.
Yeah. All right. So first overdrive, fifth gear. Matt, in your opinion, what is the secret to stick shift racing?
Rich Guido.
Awesome.
clutches, and clutches, I would say, and proper cuts, like when you're doing shifts. Some of these will do automated, like Rich has his own, which it works really good, cuts fuel and spark. Yours, you just sometimes will cut just spark, but you got to watch, because you'll have an abundance sometimes of fuel sitting in there that when you grab the next gear, your wideband, it'll kind of cause a weird waver on your data log.
Yeah.
When you're cutting spark and fuel, just making sure that your cuts are proper, and that you're, when it's recovering. Sometimes you'll have these weird look at a fuel table on a stick car, and you can tell that when they cut or they do things, it doesn't. You can set a delay till the closed loop starts after the spark cut, and you want to sometimes have that delay enough so it can kind of clean out, so it's not chasing something that didn't actually happen.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, we're going to bang her into overdrive. So you just found out yesterday that 18 years ago you knocked up this girl, and you just met your son. What advice would you give him getting into this sport?
Don't. I think the advice would be is, like, it's nice being mechanic. I tell my nephews that the one told me, oh, I want to be a mechanic. I'm like, no, you want to be a calibration engineer, or you want to go do something that makes you a lot of money that can allow you to do it for fun. Because sometimes when you do it every day, you get sick of it. But, do something either that you're passionate, that you really love, or do something that makes you a piss ton of money that then you can go play with cars. That's what I would tell them is, go get as good a job as you can that makes you the most money. Then that way you can race for fun. And like me, I tune, but then I have IT for, my main job, but I could tune full time, but I don't want to tune for you get so many people that just bring you junk. And I don't mind helping the kids that are just starting out either with it to get them going. Like I've given a lot of free parts.
Because they might be yours.
Well, they might be mine, right? But it's giving them that hand up, because I've had them come later on and say, Bill's my dad. Could you help me?
Well, a hand up is better than a hand job, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. It depends who it's from.
Woo! All right. And with that, Matt, do you have any socials or websites or anything?
I'm just on Facebook, Matt Blasco, EFI Dart on Instagram. I have the Dirty Drag Week Dart. I post the stuff on my CUDA and such. You can contact me on Facebook or on any of the ones. I have lots of people reach out for tunes. Or sometimes I'll be in an area. I don't mind, helping a bunch of people out, or if you just have questions. Sometimes I don't mind answering questions for guys. I'm busy, but
So Facebook Messenger.
yeah, Facebook Messenger. Sometimes I'm busy. If I don't get back to you right away, just text me again. I'm not ignoring you.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll tell you he'll get back to you right away. That could be the next day or in a couple of days. But eventually he will. He's just a busy dude. That's all. Don't freak out.
That's right.
All right. So let me throw a huge thanks out to Stick Shift Nation for hosting the podcast. And of course, you can find Clutch Burners on all the podcast platforms. And we would love to see you, in fact, everywhere with Clutch Burners t-shirts, Stick Shift Nation shirts, hats, and stickers. So go to stickracing.com to get all that merch. And Rich has some cool sweatshirts too, but you got to know the guy.
Yeah.
I was going to wear my Guido shirt today, but the WAF racing one just, it was a higher up on the pile, a little easier to grab.
and there's one more thing here too. The Bank Shift Billy is going to be sponsoring the Stick Shift Nation race locator this year. That's on the website. And as part of that sponsorship, we're doing a Bank Shift Billy digital clutch controller giveaway. That's right, a giveaway. So every $10 you spend on stickracing.com gets you one entry for a digital clutch controller.
You got to mention you got to mention the Billy button too. Actually, I had that in my car, and it works like applesauce. It's that good.
Yeah. If you want to talk about it for a second, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, the Billy button. I put that in my CUDA at Sick Week, and it works great. I take my removable steering wheel and walk away with it, and nobody can move the car, do anything with it. That thing has been great. I charged it, and it doesn't lose charge. I think that's one of the best innovations lately that I put in my car is that wireless button. And then, testing the latency on it. The latency is nothing. Like when I let go, there's no notice. Like the tree, it didn't really affect me because I'm heads up racing anyways. But you just have to say that it works really well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still running my Billy button on my steering wheel too. Mine's a street car, so my steering wheel stays attached. But it's been working great. Like having no cords wrapping around stuff is fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. I hadn't planned for that plug at the end.
They've actually worked out better than I thought they were going to. And you don't have those stupid cords. And when you're trying to turn a corner, you don't have to worry about them wrapping around and ripping out.
Yes.
The wall's coming really fast. You don't have to worry about.
Yeah. That's right. Or another thing is finding when you're clipping it on, you don't have to do it a certain way. It doesn't matter Where like you look at, I've seen some of these other products. It doesn't matter where, how, like it's
You don't have
independent
to
of
align anything.
anything. There's nothing to align because they're always going to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Rich, should we call it?
Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys. We're out.